Okay then. So again, thank you for joining us on this masterclass for World at Work's GRP certification program. Uh, Please allow me to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Charles Abu Saab. I'm Regional Commercial Manager for Morgan International. I'm also Program Advisor for the GRP certification. Joining me is my colleague from Talent at Work or World at Work, MENA, Ms. Asil Boghanem, Operations Specialist with Talent at Work. And our main speaker for tonight will be Dr. Todd Brody, one of World at Work's head instructors. And as you noticed in the invitation and your registration confirmation, in his bio, he will be able to share with us some very valuable insights in terms of total rewards, compensation, and benefits in our region and surroundings. So without further ado, allow me to start off with the presentation. Can everybody see my screen? I'll appreciate a reaction with a thumbs up if you can. All right. So in the meantime, while you're unable to allow yourselves to unmute, please, again, feel free to post whatever you need to post in the chat or raise your hand if you absolutely need to speak. And then you will be given the opportunity to interact with your instructor throughout the class. So as you can see, this is a masterclass for compensation and benefits professionals. So on the agenda for today, we're going to just give you a quick brief on Morgan's International and Morgan International's activities. And then Ms. Asil will be introducing you to the World at Work and GRP program. And then Dr. Todd will be working with you across the 4 main topics of today's masterclass, working out some case studies and examples that he had set out for you, where you will be interacting, sharing your experiences and his knowledge as well. And at the end, we will give you a quick section of questions and answers after your masterclass with Dr. Brody, more in relevance to the GRP courses and upcoming live online classes. All right. So,
before moving ahead, sorry, Charles, before moving ahead, some of our candidates aren't hearing properly. So if there's any option that you can raise the volume from your end.
Raise the volume from my end? I think I can raise my voice.
Yeah. I mean, any option in your device.
Yeah, all right, no problem. Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you.
All right. So basically, thank you again for joining us to this masterclass in collaboration between Morgan International and World at Work. So we will be moving forward with you for this masterclass. So as Morgan International, we've been in the education sector for over 26 years. Sorry. Okay. So we've been in the education sector for over 25 or 26 years. We have a huge pool of instructors, certified and subject matter experts on our different aspects of certifications that we provide. And we are currently operating in over 28 locations across the globe. To date, we have graduated, certified over 150,000 certified candidates on the different certifications that we provide. So we do offer professional certification and diploma preparation courses. We offer industry-specific workshops, in particular customized workshops, as well as corporate in-house trainings, in addition to soft skills workshop or customizable soft skills workshops and continuous professional education. So our certification portfolio spans across a number of worldwide recognized certifications in finance and accounting, as well as human resources and total rewards, supply chain, digital marketing, and a number of other certifications. So some of our partnership across the region, especially, and across the globe, you might recognize some of them if you are currently employed at any of them, be it in finance with the Big Four for accounting and auditing. with the major oil telecom companies, as well as banks and governmental authorities across the region in the UAE, KSA, Qatar, Kuwait, Jordan, etc. So we are a premium education partner with World at Work. We deliver live online classes at suitable timings for candidates in our region. So for our remainder of this year, we have 4 major classes scheduled: market pricing, total rewards management, business acumen, and job analysis, which will be subject of today's masterclass with Dr. Todd Brody in a few. Okay. Asil, I give the platform to you for the World at Work introduction.
Thanks, Charles. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be with you, and I'm happy to see how many interested candidates are in the GRP certification and World at Work. My name is Asil Bouhanem. I'm the Customer Success and Operations Expert at World at Work, MENA. So let me introduce you briefly to World at Work and the GRP program. Charles, if you can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as an overview, World at Work, it's a mission-driven organization. We've been in the market for more than 67 years, founded in 1955. So far, we have 19,000 members spread across 81 countries. So the organization is for professionals who are engaged in everything related to total rewards, compensation, rewards, remuneration, which is a term that you're gonna hear a lot, and it means compensation and rewards as well. World at Work serves those candidates who are mainly professionals in the workplace related to HR and related to compensation and rewards. Charles, if you can go back a little bit to the other slide. And for any people who are committed workers in the workplace all around the globe. So it is an international organization. Also, World at Work support and design the delivery of remuneration, the content of the learnings, capabilities, education, and certifications. Now, in the next slide, we can see that what are the dedicated practice area that drive success to professionals and drive success to the World at Work organization. There are multiple certifications. We're not only talking about GRP, there are certifications that are related to compensation and rewards, such as the CCP, Essentials of Compensation Management, and many other certifications that you can see on the World at Work website. Also the membership. Membership, it allows members to have community networks, online community, and many different benefits that they can access to and have available resources to. There are the learnings, which are the courses, the modules, and learning per course. There are multiple publications that are published by experts in the field, a year-long events, and many different resources that members can have access to, and resources for the market, such as surveys like salary surveys and many other resources. So GRP, what is Global Remuneration Program? The GRP designation, it signifies candidates who get the designation that they understand the impact of globalization and regional influences on the design, delivery of global reward programs. So here we're talking internationally. Once you are designated for the GRP, you will be designated on an international global level. It represents that you have knowledge, skills, and design, and administrator base and variable pay programs, and effectively communicate reward programs internationally and in international corporates and international companies and organizations as well. When the GRP program usually, or the Global Remuneration Professional Program, it consists of 10 different modules or courses, as we say. You can enroll for the course as a virtual instructor-led course with Morgan International, and it is usually followed by exams and online portals. So exams and online portal, it means that you will get access to material, that you will have access to material per course, quizzes, and of course the examination per course. For each of these courses, there's a validity of 120 days from the day of purchase. So you will have per course a 120 days access where you can benefit from the material and study and prepare for your exam. Of course, there's no specific order to take each course. So you have 10 courses, you can decide based on what course or what topic you are most comfortable with. You can start with this course and you can move onward with other courses. As long as you complete the 10 courses, you will be designated with a GRP. The exam is an on-demand exam. That's been a great improvement with WorldatWork. So you have the option to book for your exam online, and once you're ready, you can take the exam whenever you want. And of course, it is through a proctoring system which is called PSI Bridge. The exam is for 2 hours. You sit for 2 hours. You will be asked around 70 to 90 multiple choice questions, and the passing rate is 75%. When you get the Global Remuneration Professional Certification, or if you failed the exam, of course, you can retake the exam. This will be for extra charges. But once you are designated with the Global Remuneration Professional Certification, as any certification, you are you have to recertify. Just a second, sorry. Sorry for that. So once the designation is achieved, you are expected to recertify and to keep your certification active. And this recertification program, it should be renewed every 3 years. You must accumulate 12 recertification credits to keep your designation active. And of course, you can refer to the WorldatWork website to see what options and what opportunities you can get for recertification. And if you are a member, you will also have the availability and opportunities to see many recertification programs and many recertification resources. Great. So here, we'd like to provide you an example of a certificate of completion. Just let me clarify quickly. There's a certificate of completion and there's the GRP certification. The difference between them is that once you complete each course successfully and you complete the exam successfully, you will be provided a certificate of completion signed by WorldatWork. And then once you complete all the 10 courses, you will be certified and you will get the designation, which is in the next slide, as you can see, and it is also signed by WorldatWork. And usually at WorldatWork, we provide digital designation. This digital designation, you can share it on your social media, email signature, company signature, and we always encourage candidates to share their achievements socially with family, with friends, and on social media, because it's a great milestone and it's a great achievements once designated. So in a nutshell, the GRP program, it's Dr. Todd, sorry, he will be going, sorry, Dr. Todd, he will be going over, he will be diving deeper into the courses that will be presented today, and he will give you a brief understanding about the other courses that are within the GRP designation. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much, Asil. So as Asil was mentioning, as we take a look at, the courses, I'm just going to kind of walk you through the reference that she was making to the 10 different courses. So let me just get everything all set up here, ready to go. And as we go through kind of this section, Charles is going to be giving you access to unmute yourself. So if there is any questions that you have, please feel free to type a question in the chat feature. I'm probably going to have some questions for you to get a little bit of interactivity into our session today. So please feel free to either use the chat or to unmute yourself to answer my questions or to ask some questions that you may have. So as Asil was mentioning, the GRP courses combine 10 different courses, and you see the first 5 on the screen here, ranging from market pricing to taking a look at how we improve performance from a variable pay perspective, looking at remuneration from an international perspective, also taking a look at strategic communication and the international or IFRS standards. So we take a look at the accounting components and the accounting side of a total rewards approach. You know, in addition to that, as we think about the remaining 5 courses, we also see courses focusing in on, you know, understanding total rewards management, which is really, I think, a key foundational program. And if you are going to use the chat feature, please just make sure you have yourself on mute. That would be great. We're also we'll take a look at these 10 classes at Business Acumen, taking a look at things like quantitative principles, job analysis, and also taking a look at, excuse me, base pay administration. And when you look at kind of these 10 courses together, the GRP qualifications throughout this entire series really combines the technical training necessary to help an individual better design and administer global pay programs and practices with a true understanding of foundational business acumen skills. Because what we're ideally hoping to get or see, and typically we do, is really to help the person participating in this series of 10 programs become a well-rounded compensation professional. So you take a look at compensation from a number of different aspects. Now, as we look at this, I wanted to start off by asking maybe you all a couple of questions, really just to get us thinking about total rewards and put us in that mindset of total rewards. So again, I invite you in the chat feature. Let's just take a look at the first question that we see on the slide here, which is, what are some of the trends that you see from your organization perspective or from the industry that you're in general that you might think might have impact on your total rewards approach in the near future? So as you think about that, again, I invite you to share your response in the chat feature or taking yourself off mute, and whichever you'd like to do. We'll just pause there for a moment as you're maybe formulating a thought in terms of some of the trends that you're seeing. Now, don't everyone jump at the chance at once to share a trend or share a thought. And thanks, Charles, for putting that message back in the chat to say you're all given permission to unmute yourself. So please feel free to unmute yourself if you find it's easier. Yes, Adnan, please go ahead. You were going to share something.
So as you said, for the rewards program or organizations provide, so in the organization that I work at, they try to reward us with the top employee achievement at the end of each year, which is a salary increase, and it accelerates the promotion.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Adnan. Other thoughts in terms of other trends you're seeing either inside your organization or in the industry in general that will have an impact or may have an impact on your approach to total rewards, say in the next 6 months or maybe 12 months? And as perhaps you're thinking about kind of the response to that question, I'll share with you just a couple of interesting things that I'm noticing more so on a global basis. You know, as we see different things happening, you know, in different parts of the world, we see things like a cause for concern around inflationary practices. We see a cause for concern around potential recessions. Those are probably two of the biggest factors that are probably influencing many of the total rewards considerations in our workplaces today, and probably have been impacting us for the last number of months and will probably continue to impact us as this uncertainty kind of continues from those two factors. Hala, you're absolutely right. You know, the cybersecurity allowance and kind of that concern also, you know, I think is a trend that we have to pay attention to, perhaps in a little bit different way, right? When we start to think about maybe some additional trends. So as we look at kind of how this GRP program is structured, and Serini, is that how you pronounce the name? And if I get anyone's pronunciation incorrect, please do correct me, I don't mind. Merit increases related to performance appraisals, and Hala, again, non-monetary benefits. Absolutely, we continue to see this focus and this question that organizations have to ask themselves. If I only have a finite, you know, dollar amount that I can spend on things like salary increases or those types of things, what else can I do to attract and retain individuals to want them to come into the workplace or to stay in the workplace? And when we think about some of those components, that's really where we start to take a look at these 10 different modules of the GRP to really help us dive deeper within our organization to say, what can we do differently? You know, we also see in NGOs, donor funding competition is, you know, one of the limiting factors, and probably even more so right now, isn't it? Because we actually see, you know, the other concerns I was sharing with you, like, excuse me, inflationary practices or potential concerns around recessionary practices that really are causing people to say in an NGO type of environment or in many other types of environments, you know, am I going to be able to support, you know, NGO type of organizations or other type of organizations that rely on donor funding? And so we see all these questions, and as we look at some of the other great responses that you've provided, like hybrid and flexible work arrangements, or, you know, other types of things, we really have to start kind of asking the question, you know, how can we optimize these trends and minimize the negative impact that these trends may have on our organization? And that's really one of the great things that this GRP program does. As I was mentioning, it really helps us discover kind of what we can do, so we can take a step back in time really and say, how can we actually look at the future and prepare our total rewards approach going forward? And so as we think about some of these concepts and some of these ideas, you know, we really have to start to take a look at, you know, helping our organization be successful and really driving beyond just a total rewards outcome, really driving towards an impactful business outcome. And that's one of the things that our GRP program, you know, in its series of 10 modules or 10 classes helps us do. And there's some other great responses, and thanks everyone for sharing your responses. I see here, you think except the IT, other sectors are badly impacted due to economic crisis and current world crisis. And we see a varying degree of that. You're absolutely right. So thanks for sharing that and confirming that from your perspective. So I want to start taking you through kind of the programs that I wanted to really highlight. And we're going to just take a look at kind of the 4 programs that Charles mentioned a little bit earlier that Morgan is going to start offering between now and the end of the year, or just in the next few months. You know, that's the ones that I kind of chose to spend some time highlighting. Now, as we take a look at the first one, and these are really in no particular order, they're probably in a slightly different order than what Morgan is going to be offering them in, excuse me. But as you take a look at this first one, the Total Rewards Management Program, this is really oftentimes considered an ideal starting point. I think, as Asil mentioned, you can really start anywhere, and anywhere is truly a great start to help us understand how we can look at different components and different pieces to help our organization be more successful and have the total rewards programs and policies and practices really drive business outcomes. So as we look at this program, this one, as I mentioned, is probably an ideal starting point that really helps to teach us what's required, first of all, to formulate, excuse me, a total rewards program that has truly the power to attract and retain individuals in our workplace. You know, I have the opportunity to work with many organizations on a global basis, and I find it, you know, so fascinating that everyone thinks they're so unique and so different in different parts of the world. But quite honestly, there's a lot more commonality than what we give credit for. And one of those common things that I see in many different organizations is that there's a struggle to continue with this attraction and retention component or standpoint. Now, as we take a look at what ultimately, you know, we see in this particular program, we see really emphasis given to some key areas, and they're oftentimes considered, you know, the 5 elements of total reward. So I want to share those with you, plus a couple of other components that you'll see in this first program. We take a look at, first of all, an introduction to total reward, so that everyone has a good understanding of some key terminology, and also starting to take a look at how we've evolved our approach to total rewards over time. We also start to take a look at, you know, how do we include and incorporate and understand how benefits help form an important part of an approach to a total rewards strategy. We also start to take a look at development, excuse me, and career opportunities, which is, again, this ideal foundational program. Some of the other components that we start to take a look at in this total rewards management kind of high-level overview and introductory program are focused on compensation, really understanding what are some of the key elements of effective compensation practices, really looking at how do we build things like a job worth hierarchy and understand different types of payments that we might make, including things like base pay or pay adjustments or variable pay approaches. You know, we saw a little bit earlier, Gorelli, you mentioned work life and that kind of flexible hybrid work arrangement. That's also part of, you know, this first foundational introduction to total rewards management. How do we actually understand how total rewards is actually, you know, also includes that work-life component? And then we take a look at, you know, a few others, really understanding performance and recognition and what happens from a performance management perspective and how that might drive our approach to our total reward strategy and really the relationship between those two things. And then really understand how we put this all together ultimately in what I've been referring to as a total reward strategy. So what I wanted to kind of show you is just a couple of the components or pieces that you would be walked through or you would be educated or further develop your skills in relation to. So, you know, one of the things that, you know, we all have probably experienced over time, regardless if we've been in our career or our organization just for a few years, or if we've been in our career or organization for quite a number of years, is that, you know, everything has really evolved. And, you know, total rewards also has evolved over the last number of years as well. When we think about, you know, an approach to total rewards, say 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, or maybe even for some of our organizations just 2 or 3 years ago, the main focus that we had was on what we call base pay. That's either an hourly wage or an annual salary that we pay people. And it's oftentimes driven by things like our job description and our job valuation. But what we discovered probably, I'm going to say probably 20 to 25 years ago, is that wasn't enough. And so we started saying to ourselves as organizations, what else do we need to do? How do we add in, you know, other components and other pieces to help attract and retain and motivate people to, so that we see individual success and ultimately organizational success? When we look at kind of the next phase of evolution, what was added to kind of base pay is what we call total cash. And that includes kind of all the additional payments that we might make in addition to our base pay. That could be things like bonuses or incentives or commissions as ways to incent individuals as well. And then we started taking a look to say, but that's still not quite enough. Let's evolve just a little bit further and take a look at, you know, adding in kind of the benefit component piece in addition to base pay and variable pay. And then probably somewhere around 10 to 12 years ago, we started to see again this need to continue to evolve, where we start to take a look at focusing on kind of total rewards. And total rewards includes not only the monetary components, but many of the non-monetary components that help attract and retain people so that they can, you know, be motivated for, again, individual success and organizational success. So this is where we see things like well-being and recognition and career development being part of an approach to total rewards. And you might say, but I thought things like performance management and career development would be part of a learning and development function or some other function within an organization or within HR. And when we take a look at this, what we've discovered over the last, you know, 10 to 12 to maybe 15 years is just how it's important, or how important it is to have this full integration to say, we can't just think about total rewards separately from learning and development versus talent acquisition versus, you know, employee relations versus whatever other area in HR. We have to look at these things in totality to make sure that we as HR professionals or we as compensation professionals are really helping to drive a business outcome. And that's really one of the key messages that we see in this first, excuse me, module, or this first program, or this introductory program. One of the other things, you know, that we start to take a look at is really how do we develop a total reward strategy? And one of the, you know, tools, pardon me, that we use is what you see on the screen here is our total rewards model. So what are some of the influences from that, from both inside and outside the organization that drive our HR strategy? And then in turn, how does our HR strategy align with or cascade to our total reward strategy, taking a look at all of these different things with the ideal outcome of two components. One is developing the best workforce experiences possible so that people are motivated and excited and continue to want to learn and want to stay with the organization and contribute to their own success and ultimately the organization's success. And that's where, again, as we take a look at all the components and pieces, we start to really understand just how important it is to have this interconnection. As part of our discussions in this particular program, in the Total Rewards program, we also start to think about, what is a business strategy? So we have to go beyond just kind of this focus on total rewards or beyond just the focus on an HR strategy, but how does it ultimately all fit together? As we think about kind of a business strategy and some other terms like a mission and a vision, we really start to explore kind of the components of all of these aspects so we can really align our total reward strategy to drive those business outcomes that I've been referring to. Now, some of the other things that we also get to interact and understand better and discuss are some of the factors that really influence our approach to compensation or our approach to total rewards. Not only things like the HR strategy, but how do we want to pay our people? What's kind of our compensation philosophy? Do we want to do things like lead the market or match the market or lag the market? And are we intentionally doing so? Or are there other factors that are going to really drive what we're seeing and what we're experiencing or what we ultimately need to do? We take into consideration things like how competitive, is the environment that we operate in? Do we have very few competitors? Do we have numerous competitors? Are we also looking at what competition truly means? Many times when we take a look at competition, you might say to yourself, well, I'm in a particular industry, maybe it's government, maybe it's education, maybe it's something else, and we don't have competitors. But I'm here to tell you, you do. You might not have a direct competitor competing for your external customers, but you have direct competitors competing for your employees. So we need to understand that competitive environment, both from a customer perspective and from an employee perspective, so we can design our total reward strategy in the best way possible. And of course, what are some of the laws and regulations that we have to follow in order to comply with different law and regulation, perhaps even in different parts of the world? So these are some of the really interesting and insightful things that we start to take a look at. Now, as we continue on, we start to really kind of further refine not only what compensation is, but how do we actually start to really take a look at how do we manage compensation programs as well? Because one of the things that we know is that compensation is probably one of the most visible elements of our total rewards approach. And it really does deserve a significant amount of attention and planning to it. This is what our frontline employees see when they see their paycheck, when they talk about their hourly rates, when they see what gets deposited into their bank account or the check that gets produced for them. This is such a focal point and such a critical piece of a total reward strategy that we do spend, a good amount of time understanding kind of how we design the compensation pieces of a total reward strategy. But not only just designing those compensation pieces, but really also starting to take a look at how do we effectively communicate compensation plus the other elements of total reward. So there's a great wealth of information when we start to take a look at truly understanding compensation. Now, I think Asil mentioned when she was kind of giving you a high-level overview that there is an exam at the end of each of these modules or each of these programs, and you need to, complete the multiple choice question exam. Depending on the module, there's somewhere between 70 to 90 multiple choice questions and achieve a passing score of 75%. But all throughout kind of the programs or the modules, there's also some check-ins just to really help us make sure that we're understanding kind of what's actually happening with the content and information and this technical knowledge. So as we take a look at an example here, I wanted to share with you one of the example quiz questions. These aren't from the actual exam. These are actually from the quizzes that are contained in each of the modules. So let's just pause here and let me maybe have you answer the question, which says, which of the following best describes the business strategy? And I'll invite you to share your response in the chat feature as to which one you think is the correct answer. I see a few people responding already. And we have some variability in our responses. So I'll give those that want to respond still just another moment or so to respond, and I'll share with you kind of what the correct answer is from this particular quiz question. I like your response, Lena All. Unfortunately, there's one best answer, and that's where we start to take a look at, as part of our program, also truly understanding how do we read questions and understand questions so that we set ourselves up for success as part of the exam, right? So when we take a look at the response to this particular question, if you chose response D, the last one, you would be correct. All the other responses are pretty good responses, but they're not a true definition of a business strategy. They might be a definition of a mission or a vision. That's what we actually see in choice B and choice C. Choice A, as we take a look at this particular question, it just talks about the products that an organization will produce. A business strategy includes not only just the product component, but really taking a look at understanding all those elements that go into delivering our goods or products or services in a competitive way. And that's why in this case, choice D is our best response. So if you chose something other than D, don't stress and don't worry, because keep in mind, the goal is only to get 75% to pass your exam after each module. The goal is not to get 100%. And what that truly means is that we're probably going to get a few questions incorrectly. Or incorrect, and that's absolutely fine. So as we take a look at this, that's really one of the great things about participating in not only this particular focused module, which is the total rewards management module, but really all the modules, so that you can set yourself up for success on for each of these module exams. And ultimately, after you've completed 10 of them, you'll then hold the credential of GRP, or Global Remuneration Professional. So as we look at kind of these programs, they're not just there to share information or kind of the technical pieces. It's really to help you to understand and how you apply your knowledge in the exam setting, as well as back in your organization. So let's go ahead and continue on and think about just a few other things, as we kind of round out this first particular module. When we start to take a look at things like a mission and a vision, we really start to see, missions and visions being created and crafted in a multitude of different ways. And one of the things that I really think is beneficial from, this particular program, again, the Total Rewards Management Program, is it really helps us to step back and reflect on what our mission and vision and values might be, and ask some key questions to make sure that we've articulated that in the best way possible and have created our total reward strategy that's supportive of it. So on the screen here, you see an example of, excuse me, a mission and vision. And, as I was mentioning, part of the program is really helping us step back and say, what are some of the things that are great about this mission and vision? What aspects do we like? What aspects don't we like? What could we add or change? Or what do we need to look at proposing to improve our mission and vision, so that we can really have this greater alignment between, our organizational activities and then our, excuse me, activities from an HR strategy perspective, and ultimately our activities from a total rewards perspective. So we see that cascading, or that aligned approach between all of these three things. So as we think about this, I think as Charles mentioned at the very beginning, we see this program, the Total Rewards Management Program, being offered as one of the first 4 offerings excuse me, that Morgan will be offering between now and the end of the year. So before we continue on, I just wanted to pause quickly for a moment or two to see if there are any questions about this particular module or this first module. And please feel free to type your questions in the chat feature, or you can save your questions until the end of our session. We'll have some time towards the end of the session to also kind of answer any questions you may have, either content-wise or logistics-wise. So let's go ahead and continue on. And I want to walk you through kind of in a similar fashion about one of the other programs that is going to be offered through Morgan between now and the remainder of the year, which is the Job Analysis Documentation and Evaluation program. And you'll notice kind of this GR3 in brackets, or some letters and numbers kind of after each of the introductory statements on the slide here. That's just the course number in case anyone was wondering what that was. So as we take a look at this particular program, this course digs a little bit deeper and helps us start to examine the methods and processes that really help to support job analysis and job documentation and job evaluation, so that ultimately we can attract and retain and motivate, employees to be successful. And again, in turn, as you've been hearing me say a number of times already, to help the organization be successful. We're going to start to take a look at how we actually understand and various different methods of job evaluation, taking a look at things both like quantitative and market-based approaches. And there's a number of different exercises that we have in this particular session that really help us give a hands-on practical component. So once again, to kind of go a little bit deeper into kind of each of the areas that we're going to be covering, once again, we see, a strategic overview with the foundation being that total rewards model, and also including things like some key terms and definitions, so we understand kind of ultimately what we're doing by when we say a job analysis or job documentation or job evaluation. As we look at those components, job analysis really takes us through the job analysis process, really looking at where we get job information from, what are some of the data or data gathering techniques that we might use. When we take a look at job documentation, what does job documentation look like? Is it a job description? Is it more than a job description? And what are the different types of formats that we might use, and help us understand what format or formats may work best for us. Once we have that in place, what that truly allows us to do is evaluate the job so that we can determine kind of the relative net worth that a job has to an organization. And in order to do that, we have to select the best and most meaningful job evaluation strategy for our organization. Sometimes that may include what we call a market-based job evaluation to determine that relative net worth to the organization that a job has. Sometimes that may include what we call a non-quantitative job evaluation method approach, something like a ranking method or a job classification method, or we might use things like a quantitative job evaluation approach. This could include things like a point factor system or some type of qualitative plan summary that really helps us value jobs. Now, when you hear me say this term, the relative net worth of the job to the organization, I don't want anyone to misinterpret that. And that's an important part of this particular module. All jobs are important to an organization. It's just that some jobs are more important than other jobs. And that's what this particular module helps us understand, is how do we get, that differentiation between one job versus the next. And ultimately what accompanies that is different pay factors that go with higher value jobs. So the higher value the job is to the organization, the more that someone is probably going to get paid as an incumbent in that role. The lower value job to the organization, the less that they're going to get paid. And it's not to say that all jobs aren't important, but there's just varying degrees of importance that a job may have. Now, one of the other things that we see in our modules here is really just to kind of help us understand what are some of the key concepts or key outcomes that we should look to expect. And once again, these are really helping us understand what's going to be contained in the exam for a particular module. As we look at this, some of the things that we'll need to understand in this particular approach or this particular module, job analysis, documentation, and evaluation, are things like understanding why it's important to complete steps in the order that, I just walked you through them, so that we can determine our base pay structure, again, to determine that relative net worth. Also taking a look at some of the terms that we might use to help us differentiate job responsibilities and job roles within an organization. And also start to take a look at not only the job description, but what we call the job specifications. So the importance of the job, people's background or education or experience that are required. What's the acceptable level of performance standards for a particular job? That's all included as part of a job specification. And for many of us, we might blend our job description and our job specification into one document. And again, we'll talk about all of those different approaches or those different things. Now, to help us a little bit more, I also want to introduce you to something else that you'll see, not only in this program, the job analysis, documentation, and evaluation program, but a common thread that we see in many of the programs, just to help make sure that we stay grounded in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. How do we make sure we continue to see this focus on our mission and vision, what the business strategy is, what's the HR strategy, what's our total reward strategy, that truly allows us to design and administer our total rewards programs in the best way possible, keeping in mind that evaluation of a total reward strategy, or really any strategy, is so critical and so important. So how do we continue to do that to make sure what we're doing is relevant and is really driving the business outcomes that we're looking for? I think one of the other really interesting things and really great things that's contained in this particular program is really understanding, how do we build a base pay structure? Taking us through a job analysis and job documentation and job evaluation. And I really like this slide because it's going to show you, or hopefully it's showing you, kind of all the key components and pieces excuse me, that go into building a base pay structure, from the very beginning, doing that job analysis, to the end outcome of really our base pay structures and approaches. And for those of you that have experience in compensation, oftentimes I get asked the question, well, why do I need to take this? Because I already know how to do all these things. And I'm oftentimes surprised, when people have a lot of experience, many times they're working harder than what they have to. And one of the things that I think is great about this particular module or this particular class is it helps us, make sure that we're managing our time and our resources in the best way possible. So how do we actually simplify some of these things so that we get maybe a better outcome or the same outcome, and have to do maybe just a little bit less work to drive to that outcome? So that's one of the, I think, exciting things that you see in this particular program. Now, as we take a look at, some of the other components and some other pieces that we understand or will understand or better understand as part of this particular program, is really understanding what a job description, not only entails, but how it actually influences many of the other things that happen within an organization. It really helps to drive things like our employee relations strategy and our learning and development strategy, helps us understand things like what talent or what knowledge or skills or competencies or capabilities we're going to need both now and in the future. So how do we actually see kind of all those components? And all of that comes out of our job description. So again, a wealth of information. And then we also introduce, some additional concepts, or perhaps some new concepts that people may be less familiar with or not familiar at all. When we're taking a look at, engaging with, creating a base pay structure, we might look at internal or external remuneration, surveys, and really helping us understand how we do practical things like aging data or leveling data. And that's what we mean by level cutters, as we're starting to take a look at kind of this concept or this idea of leveling data, so that we can make sure that we have a good benchmark or good comparison if we're doing market-based job evaluation, or if we're looking inside the organization, that we're looking at, jobs in an equitable or more equitable manner. Now, as we take a look at kind of our level cutting approach, again, you'll have some hands-on experience where we start to take a look at, some job descriptions, and you'll be asked to really kind of roll up your sleeves once again and work with colleagues in the session along with your instructor to help make sure that you understand how to do many of these things, like our level cutting approach. So how do we get a better, more accurate comparative approach when it comes to looking at things like market pricing or valuing our jobs appropriately. So some really, really exciting things happen in this particular program. Now, once again, I just wanted to pause here for a quick moment to see if there are any questions about this second class that I just walked you through. And again, feel free to take yourself off mute, to type your question in the chat feature. Or if you want to hold your questions till the very end, that's absolutely fine as well. I don't mind questions at any point in time. Great, well, let's go ahead and continue on and take a look at, another module or another lesson that we have, or another class that we have as well. And this next one is business acumen for compensation professionals. And I think, one of the things that we've probably recognized, especially more so, I would say in the last 5 to maybe even almost 10 years, is that in a competitive industry or competitive environment, like many of us find ourselves in, we also have to make sure that we stay relevant and understand what's happening both inside the organization, beyond kind of the HR space or beyond the total reward space, but also, again, what's happening outside of the organization as well. And as we look at kind of, understanding not only the technical aspects of our job, we have to also shift kind of how we look and how we respond and how we consult and how we design things like our total reward strategy or kind of the support mechanisms around that. And what that means is in that shift of thinking is we have to think more so like a business leader, right? And so how do we actually start to make that mindset shift? It's really interesting because WorldatWork did a career census. They did it in 2012. They did it in 2016, and then they are just releasing the latest one. I think there was a little bit of a delay, from a COVID perspective. And what they found, from consistent outcomes is that strategic business understanding was really one of 8 key differentiators in top performers around the world. And what that really means is if we understand, business concepts, business ideas, how business operates, it really helps us drive individual outcomes or successful outcomes and ultimately organizational successful outcomes. So as we take a look at, gaining this understanding, we have to really start to embody what we typically call business acumen skills, really knowing what's going on around us and how the business works both internally and externally. And ultimately, we might ask the question, why do we need this? And it helps us just make better business decisions. So as we take a look at this particular program, there are, a number of different areas that we focus in on, starting off with really truly understanding what business acumen is, also starting to take a look at knowing how our business works. We see a component that we include in here around financial literacy. So understanding different, financial measures of success, also starting to take a look at making sure that we understand kind of some key financial metrics or key financial documents, such as a balance sheet, a profit and loss statement, a cash flow statement, and know how these are used inside and outside of organizations so that we get a better sense of, how we look at, the financial components and aspects, recognizing that our people are oftentimes one of the biggest expenses that an organization has. One of the other pieces that we take a look at when it comes to this particular module or this particular class is really stepping back and truly understanding kind of how a business evaluates itself and looking at those key measures of success. And we see, terms like key performance indicators being used, understanding things like a balanced scorecard, looking at the different quadrants of a balanced scorecard. So we see all those key components and key pieces, that businesses use for evaluation. But we don't finish there. One of the things that we also see really woven into many of the modules individually, and if you remember from the 10 that I kind of gave you a brief overview on, communication is such a critical piece to anything that we do as we build and design a total reward strategy. So how do we ultimately communicate in the best way possible? What are some of the considerations that we have? What are some of the resources that we use? How do we tell an effective story to business leaders, to employees, to an external audience, to a board of directors? Those are all key components of demonstrating good business acumen. And that's one of the great things that I think is included throughout all the modules or all of the classes, and then also in a standalone program as well. So as we take a look at this particular program, I just wanted to highlight just some of the key components and pieces, really starting, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, to define what is business acumen and really understanding what that means, and again, why it's so important. Starting to also look at kind of what are some of the key business acumen skills and behaviors associated with developing and understanding and interpreting things like a mission and vision and values and our business strategy, and how all these things influence our organizational culture, and what goes into the creation of an HR strategy, so that ultimately our total reward strategy is aligned with all of these components. We see this term culture, and you might think, well, we're talking total rewards. We're talking how we pay people, how we reward people, how we incentivize people. But truly understanding, the culture and maybe even subcultures in our organizations, and the ability to speak about that and make sure that our total reward strategy is reflective of the culture of the organization is so key and so critical. I think one of the really great things about all of these 10 programs is it's not just focused on understanding the numerical components of a total reward strategy. It's also understanding the behavioral components of a total reward strategy. Because when we really look at this, what's at the core of total rewards is the emotional connection that employees have to the organization. And that's really one of the things that we need to understand is, how do we ensure that we're engaging people at an emotional level through our total reward strategy? Now, some other things that we take a look at when it comes to this particular program, again, our Business Acumen for Compensation Professionals program, is really asking the key question: why are organizations in business today? And again, walking through things like our mission, our vision, our values, and our strategy, and maybe things like a profit model. But I wanted to pause here, and I'm going to invite you in the chat feature to answer this question. So why is your organization in business today? And if anyone wants to take themselves off mute to share verbally instead of typing it, you're more than welcome to do that. But I'm just going to pause here and ask you the question: why do you think your organization is in business today? So many times we might say, and thanks Charles for saying that, we might talk about the financial component, but a financial component is an outcome, right? We do something for our customers that drives a financial outcome. So let's kind of re-ask that question a little bit differently. What is it that you're doing for your customers that attract them, that retain them, and want to do business with you? And that's really how we have to look at asking this question, because regardless if we're in a profit-driven organization or an NGO or a nonprofit organization, we're all here to make money. What we do with that money looks differently based on kind of the different, organization that we might be in or industry that we might be in. But what's the need that we're trying to fulfill for our customers? That's truly why we're in business. And from that, we look to create what we call a profit model so that we can create profitability. And so I see some really great responses here. You're in business to deliver the best quality healthcare, to see a peaceful world. Batul, you're saying to build a good brand and presence in the market. And we really have to understand kind of what our organization is, what our organization means to, our customers, our consumers, the world that we operate in, the communities that we operate in. So this is a key question that we have to be able to ask and answer. Oh, I thought I saw someone take themselves off mute. Please go ahead. Someone was gonna share, and I didn't quite see who it was before they put themselves on mute again. No, maybe not. No problem. So that's really one of the things. If there's a couple of things that I can leave you with from our session today. Hopefully, one is that you're going to be excited to join kind of the 4 modules that excuse me, Morgan is offering between over the course of the next few months to the end of the year. But really helping you understand, and developing this business acumen to say, what is the purpose of my organization? Why are we in business beyond that profitability measure? But why are we in business? What are we trying to accomplish? And that's really a key message that I'd like you to start to think about, because I think it'll be helpful for you, regardless of any of the programs that you may take for your GRP approach. Now, as we continue on with our business acumen for compensationals professionals program, we also start to take a look at the importance of understanding where the organization is in their business life cycle. Are they in a startup phase? Are they in a growth phase? Are they in a maturity phase? Are they in a decline phase? Are they in a period of regrowth or no growth or something else? Because as we look at each aspect of the business life cycle, our total reward strategy has to reflect that and support that, while helping the organization move to that next level of life cycle. So it's really this double-edged sword. So we really start to truly understand why it's so important for us to say, where are we from a business life cycle perspective? Is the organization new and therefore has fewer formal policies and practices and procedures like we typically see in a startup? So what will our approach to total rewards look like? Are we in the growth stage and the organization being highly focused on growing sales or distribution capacity or determining how to efficiently produce products or services to ultimately meet a growing demand? Again, our total reward strategy will need to look different. Are we in the mature phase where typically we see more of a maintenance approach and our total reward strategy needs to reflect that? Or are we in a decline phase? And decline could mean many things. It could be declining revenue, declining market share, declining something. And once again, our total reward strategy has to reflect that. So really understanding where we are in our organization's life cycle. Now, I kind of alluded to this already, but we'll talk a little bit more about kind of financial reports and really understanding how organizations use financial reports. And I think one of the really nice things about this particular module or this particular program, the Business Acumen for Compensations Professionals program, is really helps us to digest, what we see across companies and across industries that have kind of that commonality. Again, I shared a few measures of success or financial documents like a balance sheet or an income statement or a cash flow statement, but really looking at truly understanding, assets versus liabilities versus equity versus cash in or cash out versus net profit or gross profit or EBIT or EBITDA. And all of those terms we might hear, we might know, or we might only have limited insight to. So it may be a refresher for some and a great learning experience for others. Now, something else that we start to take a look at as well, as I kind of alluded to already, is kind of our balanced scorecard. And really truly understanding how a balanced scorecard is a tool to measure success. And a balanced scorecard typically has 4 different quadrants we see. A financial quadrant, which is what we call a lagging indicator, something that happens after the fact. And we see the other 3 quadrants: customers, internal processes, or sometimes called, internal business processes. And the 4th one being innovation and learning, or sometimes called the employee experience. All those last 3 that you see on here are something that we call leading indicators. Those are things that we have the opportunity to influence and control. And we really start to take a look at, how do we focus on these leading indicators to ultimately drive the lagging indicator? And that's one of the things that we see as part of our approach to business acumen. Now, something else that, I talked about or briefly introduced you to already, is really taking a look at, effective communication and really understanding kind of a communication model so that we make sure that we focus on, impactful or more effective communication. Really understanding things like awareness and understanding of the audience and acceptance of the audience and commitment of the audience, so ultimately they take action. Now, I see a question that's come in to say, would it be adequate to say that the business acumen course helps see the comp and benefit financial impact in terms of expense just as much as in relation to performance boost and its impact on revenue? Absolutely, it does. And Charles, thanks for asking that question. I think that's just such a great question to ask, and you phrased it, wonderfully. That's really what we're seeing here from a business acumen course, is really understanding. I think I shared with you already that the greatest expense an organization typically has is the cost of their employees. So how do we make sure we understand what a business is trying to achieve, not only just from a cost perspective, but from an overall strategy perspective, so we can design our total rewards approach or our total rewards strategy to meet those business needs. So hopefully, Charles, that helps answer the question. Or if someone else was thinking about that same question, hopefully that answers the question as well.
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. Now, as we continue on, we'll take a look quickly at our last program that I wanted to walk you through, and then we'll open it up to any last questions that you have as well. So the last one that I want to highlight is our market pricing and how we conduct a competitive pay analysis. Now, this course provides more of a consistent and effective methodology for market pricing benchmark jobs to really help develop, not only our data utilization skills, but really help to understand the difference between market pricing and the other quantitative and non-quantitative approaches that we see. When we look at market pricing, oftentimes organizations default to this approach simply because it's just that. It's simpler or it's an easier approach to take. But what we don't always recognize is that it's a little bit less accurate than some of the other approaches that I shared with you in one of the earlier modules, the non-quantitative approaches and the quantitative approaches. So when we look at market pricing, it's also more than just kind of Googling what's the average salary for, a drafter or a senior draft technician. It's really understanding kind of how we look at market pricing components so we can get the most accurate reflection possible if we're going to use market pricing as one of the ways or as the way when we take a look at pricing our jobs or determining the relative net worth of the jobs to the organization. So as we take a look at, some of the individual components as well, once again, we start off by taking a look at the total rewards model. So by the time you're finished all 10 classes, you will have seen this total rewards model, and I'm sure you'll have it committed to memory. Really understanding kind of, and once again, reflecting or refreshing our compensation philosophy, truly understanding how our base pay structure works and making a determination of the job worth hierarchy, or what I've referred to as the net worth of jobs that an organization has. We start to also understand things like market pricing and how that helps us, or connect us to our business strategy. We start to take a look at how we use surveys and survey data, how we might also go about creating our own survey and collecting our survey data or data. We also start to take a look at, key components such as how do we actually use the data once we collect it? What are some of the biases that we might see? How do we try and reduce bias to the greatest degree possible? What are some of the special situations that we have to pay attention to? And also, as you see here, a common thread, which is communication. So as part of this particular, module or this particular class, we start to really have understand and ask some key questions. What are we trying to accomplish inside the organization? And based on our business strategy, our HR strategy, the competitive advantage we're trying to create, where will we position ourselves from a pay perspective? And where will we position ourselves from an overall total reward perspective? Because those are kind of two different viewpoints that we might have. If we're looking at it just from a pay perspective, are we going to lead the market? Are we going to lag the market? Are we going to match the market? Are we going to have a lead lag approach? What is the approach that we're going to take? we ask these same questions of our overall total reward strategy. And you might say, well, aren't they both the same? And the answer is actually, no, they're not. What we might see in some organizations is they choose to lag the market from a pay perspective, but they lead the market, say, from an incentive or benefits or some other total rewards perspective. And that's where we might see overall they're going to match the market. But in those components that we see that are made up or that make up our total reward strategy, we might have different viewpoints because of that. Now, as we take a look at kind of this market position component, we also have to say to ourselves, you know, as we ask these questions, are we going to lead the market? Are we going to match the market? Are we going to lag the market? How will we go about doing that? Are we going to do this across the board with all of our jobs? Excuse me. Are we going to take a look at some unique jobs and those will lag the market? Other unique jobs will lead the market and the majority of our jobs will match the market. So there's a whole bunch of consideration that we look at when it comes to market pricing. Now, to help us with this as well, what we see in this particular program is really helping us to define some key terms, because many times organizations will use these terms interchangeably or in some cases somewhat incorrectly. So when we look at terms like market pricing and market rate and something like a market rate composite or things like slotting or whole job comparison or variations when it comes to pay structure, we see these terms being used fairly interchangeably. So it's really to help us, excuse me, lay the foundation for what these terms mean so that ultimately we can have a common language that we can use within our organization to help people understand what we're trying to accomplish. Now, we also start to take a look at, as I mentioned, things like salary surveys. So really understanding a really basic question is, why are salary surveys used? And you can see some responses here, but really helping us understand, you know, how a salary survey is used beyond the question of why it's used and how do we use it to our advantage. We also recognize that salary surveys aren't the only data point to collect. And as we look at things like the age of a salary survey or lack of direct comparison, maybe in unique markets or unique locations around the world, how do we actually adjust some of the information that we're seeing, excuse me, so that there's a more accurate comparison? And that's one of the key focus areas of this particular module. We start to take a look at, you know, terms like job matching. And again, are we going to be 80% close, 60% close, 95% close? And what's acceptable from an organizational perspective? Another question that's come in, does non-monetary benefit fit somewhere within the comparison? That's a really great question, Charles. It can, but that's one of the things that we have to make a determination of. So oftentimes when we look at kind of the market pricing component, we may look at the non-monetary benefit as well. So things like recognition programs or non-monetary recognition programs or non-monetary rewards programs. And that's where we have to ask ourselves the question, are we going to lag the market from pay and maybe match or lead the market from maybe some of those non-monetary components? So absolutely, that discussion, the non-monetary discussion, is included in this particular program. It's also included in a few of the other programs as well. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So as I mentioned, there's a few other pieces or a few other components. And once again, we get some practical examples as well and hands-on experience when we talk about, you know, some of these aspects or some of these pieces. When we talk about aging data, you know, as we look at a salary survey, for example, if we were to purchase a salary survey today and it was published, say, yesterday or in the last week, that survey can be anywhere from 12 to 18 to 24 months old. Surveys take time to collect the data, produce the data, analyze the data, determine, you know, the quality of the data, do all those kind of things. So many times when we purchase a survey off the shelf, it's not going to be the most accurate comparison, typically because it will be anywhere from 12 months to 24 months out of date. So how do we manipulate the data? And when I use that term manipulate, I don't mean in any nefarious way or any bad way, but how do we actually bring that data up to date so we can do a more accurate comparison? So to help us in this particular program, one of the exercises or activities that we start to take a look at doing is really walking through things like, how do we age data? So how do we bring that salary survey data up to date so we can do that more accurate comparison? Now, as we take a look at this, I'm just going to share with you kind of some examples of what we might see and what you would be walked through in the program so that we can understand, how we actually might age data to do that more accurate comparison. Now, as we look at it in the program, there's actually 3 different activities that help us, each with just a little bit more complexity associated with it. So when we take a look at our organizations, there's a strong recognition that, some organizations have more of a foundational approach to total rewards. Other organizations have a little bit more complex approach to total rewards. So as we take a look at kind of all of these programs combined, it's really important for us to understand, what we're trying to accomplish here. And one of the things that we're trying to accomplish is really helping our total reward strategy drive a business outcome. So before we kind of, continue on with maybe some of your questions, I wanted just to kind of reflect on maybe some questions that you probably have some great insight into. And as we think about things like incentive programs, from your perspective, why do incentive programs oftentimes fail, or incentive pay approaches oftentimes fail? So we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit from the content-driven pieces, and I'll be interested to hear from you, why incentive programs oftentimes aren't as successful as potentially they could be. What do you think? Yeah, so we might see the subjectivity. We might see maybe instability of the revenue. That could be one. I invite you to share in the chat or take yourself off mute. And I just see a spelling error. My apologies. That should say pay approaches, not pay approached. So why do incentive pay approaches oftentimes fail, or why are they not as successful as they could be? Maybe delayed gratification. Can you say more about that? And if it's easier for you to take yourself off mute, Michael, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so long period between the action that I'm taking and then the reward I'm getting, or that incentive I'm getting, that's what you're referring to? Yeah, absolutely. So as we think about this, I have some thoughts to share with you as well as to, why incentives oftentimes don't work or is not as successful as they typically could be. We see, Shabir, absolutely misalignment with business objectives. Maybe employees' input wasn't sought into kind of what motivates them. So we've designed something, and oftentimes we do this. We design from the outside in versus the inside out when it comes to incentive programs or any type of approach that we might see. And when we look at this, if we don't have employee input, they're probably not going to, be motivated because we're doing things that are not motivating individuals. We also see that, the goal wasn't clear, or maybe it was unrealistic. Maybe there was a failure to you really help people understand the performance goals and what the targets or what the employees' influence is over those goals. So that connection between what I do every day and what you're asking me to accomplish isn't there. And many times we see this happen in organizations is that performance standards are changed midstream. Maybe when we first launched this, we thought this is going to be good, but then so many people are achieving these goals really quite easily and quite readily. And to Charles, I think your response a little bit earlier, where we have this instability of revenue, or we might have instability of greater expense or variable expenses that are creeping up. We see, all of a sudden changing something partway through a program, and people just get disillusioned or disincentive. Hala, you're saying equity issues in the design of the incentive programs. That's also, I think, another key thing. And the list that I have on the screen here and what you're saying aren't kind of the only things that happen. But really, when we look at the design of these 10 programs, it's to help us align all the components and pieces to drive the outcomes that we're looking for. We also see, some other pieces that the performance standards were not necessarily objective. Maybe managers and employees don't understand or believe in the reliability of the results that get reported. Maybe our infrastructure, our policies and practices and procedures don't also align or support the incentive. And probably, I think one of the biggest ones was that the plan was poorly communicated. Now, as we look at this, I think one of the other outcomes that we see from your participation in all of these 10 sessions is really kind of what we should do in certain situations. And as we take a look at, this being a quick case study, you will have access to all these slides, but I encourage you on your own to read the background that you see on the screen here, the 3 paragraphs, and really start to reflect on what should you do in this situation. And as we look at this time and time again, we don't take the time to step back and reflect and say, what should we do? Where did we go wrong? What happened in the design of our program? Did we do something? Did we say something? Did we communicate something that really didn't drive the business outcome that we were looking for? All too often, we see organizations rush to design a total reward strategy and not think through the implications, either the positive implications or the negative implications. And that's, I think, one of the key competencies that get developed by your participation in all these 10 GRP programs. It's really to help say, what are the competencies I need in order to be an effective total rewards professional or an effective HR professional that has total rewards oversight. So that actually brings us to the end of our time together, or my time together. But I just wanted to take the last 10 or so minutes to see if there was any questions that you had in regards to, excuse me, the total rewards programs that I outlined, or the modules that I outlined, or GRP in general. And I think, Asil, I'm also going to turn this over to you at the same time, and Charles, to you, to help answer any questions that people may have.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Todd. That was, personally, that was excessively eye-opening. Quite a substantial amount of information, but really very interesting throughout. I know I'm personally now interested in venturing into the compensation and benefits.
Well, thanks for Charles. So we'll just open it up, and please feel free to ask any questions either in the chat, or if you'd like to take yourself off mute. Asil, I'm not sure if you were going to share some additional contact information if people have questions, or Charles, you were going to share some additional contact information if people have questions.
Yeah, I was gonna take it from this side. So I'm just waiting to see if anybody has any questions about the content that you covered before we take it forward.
So Hala is asking a question, will the courses be offered online? And Charles, I think that question is maybe more so for you from Morgan's perspective.
Yes, correct. So yes, Hala and all the other attendees, at Morgan International, we deliver all 10 courses of the GRP certification in a live online format. So technically, our classes usually span 3 times a week, 3-hour sessions. So the biggest course, I presume, would be 5 or 6 sessions in total, a span of 2 to 3 weeks. With the help of our instructors, be it Dr. Todd or any of our other qualified instructors. And technically, with the live online classes, you will be also receiving the recording of those classes for reference. The recordings will be valid for a whole month after the course ends, so that you can use them in preparation for your exams. Schedule is defined already. Yes, basically we make all 10 classes, or sorry, all 10 modules available for students. WorldatWork MENA, or Talent at Work, also provides a self-study option. But if you would prefer to move forward with a live online instructor-led lecture option, that can be provided by Morgan International. The course to be renewed every 3 years. You don't have to renew the course, you have to maintain your certification. As my colleague Asil explained in the beginning, you are required to accumulate a certain number of education or continuous education credits to maintain your certification once you've acquired it the first time. So you need to accumulate that 12, I think, credits across the 3 years to be able to renew your certification, but you don't have to resit for your exam if that's the question.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Todd. Thank you, Charles. And of course, everything you need, you have Charles. He's our star guy. You can get back to him for any questions on the GRP and on WorldatWork as well, and on the course enrollment. We hope you had a great session with Dr. Todd, and we look forward to you enrolling in the program and achieving your GRP journey and certification.
Thank you so much, Asil. Just allow me to answer a question for Mariam. Basically, Mariam, the program is intended for people who wish to be more performant or better performant in terms of compensation and benefit, better understanding their surrounding competition, the reigning best practices in the region for better strategy in compensation and benefit. You don't have to be currently in the compensation and benefit field. You can be in finance, perhaps. You can be wishing to venture into the compensation and benefits field, making yourself more attractive to employers across the globe who are seeking to devise attractive strategies, as Dr. Todd explained in the beginning, to attract and retain the top talents in their field. So yes, that would
Charles,
be open.
May I add something to your response as well for Mariam?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, so Mariam, I think that, Charles was saying you don't have to be in a compensation department. The programs that I highlighted, especially, the Introduction to Total Rewards and the Business Acumen modules, those two programs, I think those are valuable pretty much for anyone in an organization, not only even in the HR function, but for managers and leaders. Because I would say, from my experience, managers and leaders struggle to understand how to align total rewards with their business strategy. So it's not something that I think is really just designed for compensation professionals or HR professionals. It really helps to kind of help non-HR and non-compensation business leaders see the need for that critical alignment between total reward strategy and business strategy. And I think that's just something to consider as well, especially for those two programs. Some of the others might be a little bit more technical or a little bit more insightful, which may or may not attract individuals to want to know that level of detail. But absolutely, the Introduction to Total Rewards Management and the Business Acumen, I think, are two critical ones that anyone in an organization, including frontline employees, I would encourage them to participate in so they better understand all those alignments and key pieces. So hopefully that's helped as well.
Thank you so much, Dr. Todd. So concerning the schedules, we do have predefined courses, but definitely all courses can be made available when sufficient demand for either is available. So as I've shared in the beginning, we have 4 planned courses for the remainder of the year, but just as well, the remaining courses can be made available in live online format or as a self-study option directly with WorldatWork. And concerning the cost, as you can see on the shared slide, every course is priced at $1,750, which includes an exam credit. So you have no additional fees to pay for your first attempt to an exam unless you fail it. As my colleague Asil explained in the beginning, there is a retake option, which will be charged in due time if you ever fail. Our purpose is to prepare you to pass from the first attempt. Hopefully, you won't need the retakes. Now, if you commit to a number of courses, since ultimately all courses are beneficial for comp and ben professionals or people aspiring to become comp and ben professionals, any additional courses will incur a reduction on the initial price. So 2 courses will be saving you $500. And maybe we can discuss at a later stage any additional courses you would like to commit to, which will make you eligible for additional discounts in the future. And there's always the opportunity, if your organization might be interested in training a number of people to this program, we could deliver it in a customized in-house training dedicated to your company. Please feel free to reach out to me I will be sharing the recording for this session as well as a copy of the presentation to all the attendees. So feel free to reply back to me with any further inquiries you may have, whether it's regarding schedule, price, registration, or just additional information. We'd be more than happy to cater. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you so much, Dr. Todd, for the extremely valuable input. Thank you very much, Asil, for coordinating this session and for your support throughout. Hope to
Thanks,
see you all.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.